Well, hypothetically, if you take the New Testament seriously, it does, because it's a document that supersedes it. And I think there's actually technical reasons why it doesn't
supersede it on every point. I mean, this is the problem. Slavery is a very straightforward case because clearly the Bible thumpers of the South who were defending slavery with reference to the text felt they were on firm ground. And I would invite anyone to read what the New Testament and the Old Testament say about slavery to see that they were on fairly firm ground, that the balance of the honest reading was on the side of clearly we can keep slaves, right? Jesus never envisioned a world without slavery, and he admonished slaves to serve their masters well and to serve their Christian masters especially well.
The English Protestants wouldn't have agreed with that because, like I said, they were at the forefront of the fight against slavery.
Okay, but
I think
they were clearly influenced by something outside the text, and this is, again, you're making this harder than it is, and my concern is why. Right?
Well, I don't think I am, Sam, because I think that the fundamental message in the New Testament, for example, is that
so then you don't acknowledge that the Old Testament. So Jews are in possession of a book that has some diabolical passages that would be better left out. You're not going to offend me. I'm Jewish.
It's not like look in the Old Testament itself, in the Jewish Bible. There's also the seeds of the same tension. So, for example, there's a tension, and this should be a tension that's of interest to you because you've stated quite clearly in your book, in the Moral Landscape, that you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater with regards at least to religious phenomenology. You said that, for example, I still considered the world's religions to be mere intellectual ruins maintained at enormous economic and social cost, but now I understood that important psychological truths could be found in the rubble. Well, I'm trying to find the important psychological truths in the rubble. But we have to decide also if we agree about that. Like, are there important psychological truths to be found in the rubble?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, but we can't...
But the problem with Revelation, this notion of Revelation, this notion that some books weren't written by smart people, they were written by God, confines you to taking the whole text, even though this text was cobbled together over centuries, and for whole centuries, some books were in the New Testament and then they got thrown out centuries later, and some books weren't in and then got put in. So it's like it's an all too human process that got us these books in the first place. But once they were set, the believers imagine that you're stuck with every passage. And there are passages in the Old Testament that tell you to stone a girl or a woman who's not a virgin on her wedding night, take her to her father's doorstep and stone her to death, right? And where you find...
We can probably agree that those are wrong. So there's another point of agreement.
But you don't have to read the book to the end to know that it's wrong. I mean, you can get that from the paragraph.
Yeah, but that isn't what I said. I didn't say you had to read to the end of the book to know that it's wrong. I said that you needed to read to the end of the book to contextualize those statements within the whole. I didn't say that you needed to read.
There's no exculpatory context to those kinds of statements, and that's a problem.
Well, there is in the Old Testament. There's a real tension, and this is, I think, the tension that would be of interest to you. Is there's a tension between the dogmatic and the prophetic traditions, and I think to the degree that you're interested in religious phenomenology, you find yourself on the side of the prophetic tradition. And the prophetic tradition has implicitly in it, what would you call, an implicit damnation of those cruelly dogmatic rules. You see that emerge all the time in the prophetic tradition.
Arguably in Christianity. I think.
No, in Judaism, it's clearly there in the Old Testament with the distinction between the.
I was going once again to Islam, but every prophetic. I mean, the notion of prophecy is dangerous and worth worrying about. I mean, the idea that any ancient book contains in it a perfect description of rightly interpreted, however difficult to interpret it. If you're only smart enough, you could extract from this text a perfect window onto the future, right? And that whole generations of people have lived by the lights of this cockamamie idea, right? That the world is going to end and its ending is going to be glorious. Right. This is at the center of most eschatologies. It's just that when the wheels come off totally, right, that's on some levels the best thing that's ever going to happen because it's showing you that in this case, Jesus is going to come back and throw the sinners into a lake of fire. And I've read to the end of the book. It's pretty scary at the end as well. I mean, Revelation is...
Yeah, no kidding. Well, that's a really good objection. But, like when I did my lectures on the Bible last year, I said that they provided a psychological take on the biblical lectures, and that's what I'm going to attempt to maintain here, because I don't believe that I'm qualified to make fundamental metaphysical statements. But that the scene that's delimited out at the end of Revelations, that's a very interesting book read psychologically, because it's very complicated.
This is we should talk about.
Well, let me just address that. I'll only take a minute to do it, and I'll try to be succinct. So there's an idea that's expressed in that book, is that it's something like things are always falling apart in a fundamental manner. It's built into there's an apocalyptic element to human life. We fail in small ways and we fail in catastrophic ways, and everything that we have, we lose and we die. So and societies come to an end. There's an apocalyptic element built into the structure of human reality. And part of what's revealed in that strange book at the end, which is like a hallucinogenic nightmare in some sense, is that the hero is born at the darkest point in the journey. And it's a psychological truth, and it's very, very apt, because at the darkest point, this is also why Christ is born near the darkest time of the year from a metaphysical perspective. There's an idea there that when things fall apart, that's the time for the birth of the hero. And the hero in Revelation is also the place where truthful speech most clearly manifests itself, because in the Christian tradition, Christ is identified with truthful speech. And so the notion there is that redemption under apocalyptic conditions is to be found in the revelation of truthful speech, which is something that you actually believe.
Well, I believe in truthful speech, but I also believe that you can play this kind of interpretive game with almost any text. This way of thinking... But then
you could do it with the world, Sam, and that wreaks havoc with your value from facts argument.
No, actually, I didn't hear what you just said. What was that?
Well, I said you can make exactly the same objection with the world of facts. Is there's an infinite number of facts, and there's an infinite number of potential interpretations, and so tracking the pathway from the fact to a value is actually impossible. It's the same argument with regards to biblical interpretation.
We should talk about that, but I don't think that's a good analogy. There are more and less plausible interpretations of any situation, any data, and any text, arguably. But the problem is that you can read into any story some apparently meaningful set of psychological insights,
But you can do that with any set of facts too.
Well, no. I mean, there are certain things you can't over-interpret to your heart's content and come out any way you choose. My point is that first of all, this is why fundamentalism always has an edge over more sophisticated theology, because the sophisticated theology is in most cases inspired by a more and more modern recognition that, well, we can't read it literally because it either makes no sense or it makes barbaric sense, right? So we have to get away from the literal. And the more you get away from the literal, the more you are unconstrained by the text, and you can just broadcast on it anything you want to put there.